Hey, I'm Scott from Stringjoy. We couldn't shut down the machines at the shop. We're just too busy right now, so instead, we came out here to the woods in the middle of nowhere to talk about a very appropriate topic, which are multi-scale or fan fret guitars. I've got a neon green one that I just got that I'm pretty excited about that I'm going to show you, and all right, the setting might not really fit the topic, but I think you're going to enjoy this anyway. If you've been following modern metal, you probably see a lot more of these guitars now than ever, where the lowest 6th or 7th string has a longer scale than the highest string. Today we're going to talk about why that is, what it is that multi-scale guitars do for you, what the history behind them is, and of course, because this is Stringjoy, we're going to talk about what the best guitar strings are for multi-scale or fan fret guitars. If you already know everything there is to know about these guitars and just want to know our recommendation about strings, check out the description below. I'm going to put a link that you can skip directly to the string part, but otherwise stick around and we're going to show you my multi-scale and talk a little bit about the history behind these guys. I think you'll find it pretty cool. All right, so I just got this Legator, I believe I'm saying that right, that or it's Legator, I've never really known, multi-scale or fan fret 6-string. I got it used off Guitar Center, and it's basically the way that it came set up there. I got some Stringjoy 11 to 58s on it, have it down in drop C. It's pretty fun. I have to admit, I'm not really like the model customer for these sort of multi-scale guitars, but I wanted to get one because we've got a lot of players playing Stringjoy strings on them, and I always like to have something around the shop that's similar to what people are putting our strings on, so that when I test new things or evaluate what works and what doesn't, I can see what's going to work on it. So this has been kind of fun. It takes some getting used to for me as a player that's usually used to like straight frets. It's fine on like the bottom sort of chuggy part, but when I try to play lead up high, it's still taking me like a little bit of adjustment, just because those frets, you know, kind of start to lean the other way. For whatever reason, that feels a little bit weirder to me, but it's pretty fun. So you hear these guitars called a few different things depending on where you're getting it from or who's making it. Some people call them fan fret guitars, some people call them multi-scale guitars, but the gist of it is that on these guitars you have the high E string, which is of course a D for us today, has a shorter scale on it than the bottom string, which could be a 6th string or a 7th string or an 8th string. They have a different scale, and then every sort of string along the way adjusts slightly longer in terms of its scale length. So not only do we have the nut happening at an angle here in order to make that happen, we also have all the frets angled in different ways, and then the bridge is angled as well. And all those three things combine to make the guitar playable and be able to intonate and play like a regular guitar, even though it has different scale lengths. Now, just at first blush, even if you're not really used to these types of guitars, I think the idea makes some sense. If you look at the inside of a piano, for example, you'll notice that the strings that are making higher pitches are a lot shorter in scale, and when you get down to those really, really low notes on a piano, they have a way longer scale. That's why like grand pianos have that sort of funky curved shape to them. So, you know, at first blush, it makes some sense that you would want to do a similar thing on a guitar. I mean, harps kind of work that way too. So I can totally understand why it makes sense, and especially in the modern age of down tuning and all that sort of stuff, you've seen a lot of companies that make these type of guitars, be it Ormsby or Dingwall, or Ibanez makes a bunch too, or Legator like this one, getting a lot more popular, and you see them a lot more often, especially in metal circles. But before we get into the modern uses of guitars like this and how you should use them and how you should think about the strings that you're going to use on them, let's talk a little bit about the history of them. Even though you've probably only really been seeing these for the past couple years or past decade or so, especially in like metal or prog metal genres, the concept of a fretted instrument with a scale like this is a lot older than that, actually. The first example that I could find was an instrument called the bandora that dates all the way back to the 16th century, which looks not a lot different than this. Well, actually quite a bit different than this, but it does have that same sort of scale, you know, multi-scale situation going on, even though it's a way older instrument, and I'm pretty sure they probably weren't tuning down the drop C on it. In more modern times, this concept was actually patented in 1900 by E.A. Edgren, and I want to read you a little excerpt out of his patent because I think it's kind of funny. So his patent from 1900 covers, and I quote, "a plurality of frets secured to said neck, said frets being positioned at an angle, one to the other, so that the first and last frets incline in opposite directions." So even though that patent was in effect in 1900, you still didn't really see a lot of these instruments in Western music, at least, until 1977, when John Starrett invented the starboard or stairboard, I presume it's starboard, which is kind of a crazy instrument that uses the same idea, but in a little bit of a different way than the guitar. So basically like 77 years in there, you really didn't see much of anything using it. Now that all changed in 1988 when Ralph Novak patented this idea again for use on a modern guitar. Interestingly, Ralph wasn't a metal player or anything like that, he was a blues player, and he noted that he liked to have a lot of flexibility on the high end of guitars, but wanted a nice, like, clean, crisp sort of low end, and he couldn't really seem to get that with, like, the available sets of strings that were there for him, or the guitars of the day. So he patented it, and then started making those guitars in 1988. While that patent has since expired, as you might be able to guess by the fact that you see a lot of different companies making this type of instrument, he actually still owns the trademark for the term fan fret. I'm not sure how well this is enforced, because I feel like I've seen the term fan fret used by different companies, but maybe that's just being used in forums by players or things. But that's one of the reasons why you hear some people calling these things fan frets or multi-scales or whatever. Partly has to do with a little bit of a trademark situation going on. Now, its modern use, of course, is a little bit different than that blues style playing or whatever crazy folk they were doing back in 1900 on similar instruments. These days you really see these types of guitars used by metal and progressive metal guitarists, and that's largely because those guys are tuning down, not only tuning down across the board in like a Tony Iommi sort of fashion, but tuning down to drop C or drop E or drop A, and as a result I think a lot of players struggle to get their guitar to play well when you're going that low on the bottom, but you still want things tuned relatively high on top. So for that reason, I think a lot of players have found that guitars like this, especially from people like Ormsby who have been doing this for a long time, provide a great way for you to get the tension that you're after on the bottom end. The reason for that is tension is a product of the mass of the string, the note that you're tuning it up to or the pitch that you're tuning it up to, and the scale length over that string. We've talked about this a little bit in other episodes that I'll link to down below. Because of that, if you increase any of those factors, pitch, string mass, or scale length, you're going to end up with more tension. Now, I think for a lot of players, if you didn't know that you could customize your guitar strings or know that there were different options available out there for you, like we have at Stringjoy, and you were pretty much stuck playing 10 to 46 or 11 to 50, but you wanted to tune down quite a bit, you can see why that would present quite a bit of a problem. You'd have a really, really floppy low C string with like a 46 or a 50 on it. So I think that's one of the big reasons you saw guitars like this catch on and continue to catch on today, is because you can use regular off-the-shelf strings to play not off-the-shelf tunings and still have a nice bit of tension on the bottom end, flexibility on the top end, everything that you're looking for there. The other reason a lot of people really like these is one that I'm kind of still learning a little bit myself. Like I said, I haven't had this guy too long, but people talk about the ergonomics being really nice for it. I could imagine that being the case, especially with that angle of the frets, like on the top end when you're soloing. Hitting like a pentatonic box or whatever is really easy to do with your hand. You don't have to crook everything around. You can kind of do it at a slight angle, which I think with straight frets I kind of am angling my fingers a little bit there anyway. So that sort of ergonomic thing is an advantage for a lot of players too. I think it probably takes some getting used to. Most people aren't just going to pick up this guitar and feel like it plays easier than a straight fret instrument, though some people could. But I could definitely see, even from playing with this guy for a little bit, how when you get used to it over time, a lot of those things could feel a lot more natural and a lot easier. Now, this is the Stringjoy channel after all, so as you might have guessed, we're not going to get out of this without talking a little bit about strings for these guys. And I'm really glad to be shooting this video because I have a lot of people emailing me all the time about what strings they should use for their multi-scale guitars. I think a lot of people, when you get a guitar like this, you have a pretty automatic sense that this will probably need some different strings than what you're using on a normal guitar, and so, people want to know what it is they should use. Now, this is where it all gets a little bit tricky, and I think it'll all make sense as I explain it here. So, in theory, if you were trying to get a guitar like this to play exactly the same tension-wise as, a straight fret 24 3/4 or 25.5 inch scale guitar, you're correct. You would definitely want to customize your gauges of strings there. For example, getting a set that would play pretty similar to like a 10 to 46 set, as close as we can get the tensions to match, it would be 10, 13, 17, like a normal set of 10s there, and then a 24 wound, a 32 wound, and a 42 wound on the very bottom. A set like that would be about as close as you could get, at least with our strings, to having the tension feel about the same as a typical set of 10s. But there's one issue with that. Personally, I don't think a lot of people that are getting guitars like this are getting them so that their guitar can have the same tension profile as a regular set of 10 to 46s in, on a straight fret 25.5 inch scale. Reason being, if you wanted that, there's really not a lot of reason other than ergonomics to even really get a guitar like this. It's just going to have the same sort of tension as a 25.5-inch straight fret guitar, and if you're tuning down or anything like that, you'll have the exact same problems on a guitar like this as you would otherwise. So this is where it gets tricky. In reality, if you want to lean into what a guitar like this can do, if you're like most players that get these and you're looking to down tune or you're looking to have some more tension on the very bottom end, the right set of strings for a guitar like this isn't any different than the right set of strings for another straight fret guitar, because what it's doing in terms of lengthening the scale length down here, giving you a crisper sense and like more tension on the bottom, that's only going to work if you have, you know, sort of the same idea of string tension that you're getting on a straight fret guitar, and then you're expanding it a little bit to meet the tensions of this multi-scale instrument. Now I know people are going to say I'm crazy and that it doesn't make any sense that a guitar like this should get, you know, a typical set of strings like you would on any other. I see that standpoint. Honestly, I've always thought about it. I know that we could sell multi-scale specific strings and we'd sell a ton of them. I don't think people would need any convincing at all as to, you know, why an instrument like this would need a different set of strings. And we might one day, if we find some different things that, you know, might help in terms of intonation or things like that. But in terms of string tension and I think the practical usage of instruments like this, it just doesn't make sense to mess with the gauges too much so long as you're playing a set of strings that's balanced well in the first place. So, you know, you might not want to use a 10-to-46 set. Something like our balanced 10-to-48 set or 11-to-50 set would, you know, still work better on this just like it would on a regular scale guitar. But outside of that, anything that's going to work well there and be balanced there is going to fit even more what you're looking to do with a guitar like this once you get it on one. Now there is one big caveat I want to make here, and that's that if you're using a guitar like this and you're tuning down your 6th string or you're tuning down your 7th string, you know, typical dropped tunings like drop C and drop B, etc., it doesn't absolve you from the need to use a different gauge of string on that 6th or 7th string to balance that out. We've talked about this a little bit, how with straight fret instruments, when you're drop tuning that 6th string, you're causing sort of a tension nightmare. A lot of typical sets of strings already have way less tension on that 6th string, so when you drop it, you end up with like, you know, between 5 and 8 pounds less tension on there than the other wound strings, which is not what you want. This is why using a set optimized for drop tunings, like any of our drop tune sets, is going to be a lot better for you. If you're using a scale like this, that's still necessary, and the reason is, even though you have a longer scale on that lowest string, you're kind of fanning out to that particular scale, you know, with every string ahead of it. So something like a 10-to-52 set, where that 42 that you see from a lot of big companies is already like way heavier in terms of tension than the 52. If you do that here, because your 5th string is nearly as long in scale as your 6th string, you're going to have those same problems. The only way to absolve that would be if you got like a straight fret instrument that then suddenly had a 6th string that had a way longer scale, and that's not how these work. So if you are drop tuning like that, like a lot of people are, you still are going to want to use a set optimized for drop tunings. For example, on this one, I'm playing in drop C and I'm going 11, 14, 18. I believe I did 32, 44, 58. You could even use a 60 if you really wanted to get the tensions a little bit more balanced, but for me, I like to balance the tonality a little bit there with the tension as well to get something that works well. But keep that in mind, because I think a lot of people that are playing these guitars are playing in drop tunings and don't think that you can just use a standard 9-to-42 or 10-to-46 set and tune down to drop A with these guys. It's just not going to be a pretty picture. So my question to you today for the comments below, I'm getting used to this guy. I'm having some fun playing in drop C. I might even try playing in drop B or drop A and getting a little bit better over there, as you might have heard from the beginning. I'm not very good. So I want to know what songs out there I need to learn. What are your favorite songs in drop tunings? Extra point for like drop C and drop B tunings that I need to learn the riffs for. Ideally something that I can learn the riff for, but you know, that's not really your responsibility. But let me know in the comments below your favorite riffs and drop tunings. I'm excited to check them out myself.